He dumped me for losing my job. He didn't know I owned the building. His smug face didn't even flinch as he told me I was no longer enough for his ambitions. But behind his carefully curated pity, he had no idea the building he worked in, the one that made his career shine, was mine. As he turned away, thinking he'd found his new future without me, I let a slow smile slip through. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't argue. I would let him find out the truth the hard way on the lease renewal forms I alone could sign. Let the games begin. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Right there in the middle of the daily grind, a painfully trendy coffee shop that occupied the ground floor of my building. My building. He didn't know that. Of course, to him, the Bennett Tower was just a prestigious address in downtown Chicago. A gleaming monument of steel and glass where his real estate firm, Sterling Properties, leased 3 entire floors. To him, it was a symbol of the success he craved. To me, it was the legacy my father had left me, the source of a quiet power I had never felt the need to flaunt. Until now. It's not you. Rory, Nathan said, his voice a carefully curated blend of sympathy and resolve. He wasn't even looking at me. His gaze was fixed on the bustling street outside, where ambitious people in sharp suits hurried to their important lives, the kind of life he believed I had just been ejected from. It's about alignment. We're on different paths now. I need a partner who is driven, who is building something. We need to be a power couple, pushing each other to greater heights. He finally turned to look at me, his handsome face a mask of counterfeit pity, the same face I had woken up next to for 2 years, the same condescending smile he used on clients he thought were beneath him. I had just never imagined it would be turned on me, with you being, between things. The dynamic has shifted. I can't be with someone who doesn't have that fire anymore. Between things. That's what he called it. Last week, I had told him my project management position at a downtown tech firm had been eliminated in a corporate restructuring. It was a lie, a necessary fiction I had constructed to gracefully exit a job I had only taken to prove to myself and to a world that didn't know my name that I could succeed on my own merit, without the Bennett fortune. My plan had been to finally step into my true role, to take the reins of my family's commercial real estate empire full-time. I had even planned to tell Nathan, to finally let him see the whole picture, to share the secret I had guarded so carefully. I'd imagined the moment 100 times: a romantic dinner, a bottle of expensive champagne, a confession that would deepen our bond. Instead, I was sitting here, being lectured on ambition by a man who paid rent to me. A man whose entire career was dependent on the goodwill of the very woman he was casting aside as dead weight. My heart, which had been hammering against my ribs, suddenly went still and cold. The initial shock, the nauseating sting of betrayal, began to recede, replaced by a chilling, almost unnerving clarity. Every word he spoke was a brushstroke on a portrait of a man I had never truly seen before. He wasn't ending our relationship because I was unemployed. He was ending it because my perceived failure embarrassed him. It tarnished the brand he was so carefully building for himself. I understand, I said, and my voice was so calm it surprised even me. The confidence I'd inherited from my father, the poise that came from sitting in boardrooms since I was a teenager, kicked in like a hidden suit of armor. I looked at him, really looked at him, past the polished exterior and the charming smile. I saw the cold, calculating ambition in his eyes, the same look I'd seen in countless businessmen who tried to lowball my father on deals. It was the look of a man who saw people not as souls, but as assets or liabilities, and I had just been moved to the liability column. You have to do what's best for you. Nathan, I continued, taking a slow sip of my coffee. The cup was warm against my hands, a small, grounding comfort in a world that had just tilted on its axis. Your career at Sterling is everything to you. His face relaxed, relief washing over his features. He thought this was going to be easy. No tears, no screaming. He had successfully managed the situation, just like any other unpleasant business transaction. Exactly. Rory, you get it. Thank you for being so mature about this. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine in a gesture that was meant to be comforting but felt like an insult. I'm on the cusp of something huge. The firm's lease here, in this very building, is up for renewal. I'm leading the negotiations. It's a multi-million-dollar deal. If I land it, a partnership is practically guaranteed. I can't afford any distractions. A slow, dangerous smile threatened to form on my lips, but I suppressed it. Oh, you have no idea. Nathan, you have no idea what a distraction I can be. You're negotiating to stay in my building, and your future depends on a signature that will come from my hand. The power he thought he was chasing was the very power he was sitting across from, dismissing as worthless. He was so blinded by his own reflection that he couldn't see the truth right in front of him. He saw a failure. He didn't see the landlord. He didn't see the woman who could, with a single phone call, demolish the entire foundation of his carefully constructed life. He pulled his hand away and stood up, straightening his tie. Well, I should get back. Big day. He gave me one last, fleeting look. I hope you land on your feet. Rory, I really do. Then he turned and walked out of the coffee shop, striding confidently toward the main elevators of the Bennett Tower, disappearing into the marble and gold lobby of the world I owned. He left me sitting there, not heartbroken, but armed. The pain was real, a sharp, searing wound. But beneath it, something else was stirring. A cold, hard resolve. He wanted a power couple. He was about to find out what real power looked like. I stayed in that chair for a long time after Nathan left, the coffee in my cup turning cold. The bustling noise of the daily grind faded into a dull roar in my ears. My mind was a whirlwind, replaying the last 2 years like a corrupted film reel, every scene now tainted by the ugly truth of the final one. We had met at a tech conference in Austin. I was a panelist, speaking about agile project management, and he was there networking, a word he used with an almost religious reverence. He'd approached me afterward, all dazzling white teeth and expensive cologne, complimenting my insights with a practiced charm. At the time, I was just Aurora Bennett, a senior project manager who had worked her way up through sheer grit. That's who I wanted to be, my father, a man whose shadow loomed as large as the skyscrapers he built, had always warned me that the Bennett name was both a key and a cage. People will see the money before they see you, Rory, he'd said, his voice raspy from a lifetime of cigars and tough negotiations. Earn your own respect first. Then, when you take over, you'll know the difference between those who respect you and those who respect your wallet. I took his advice to heart. I used my mother's maiden name, Clark, on my resume, got a job on my own terms, and built a life separate from the Bennett empire. It was my quiet rebellion, my proof of self-worth. Nathan fell for Aurora Clark. He was captivated by my confidence, my independence. Or so I thought. Looking back now, I see he was captivated by the image. I was an accomplished professional at a respected firm. I was articulate. I dressed well. I fit the power couple aesthetic he was so desperate to cultivate. Our dates were a tour of his ambitions. He'd point out gleaming high-rises, talking about cap rates and occupancy percentages. He spoke of the partners at Sterling Properties with a mixture of envy and adoration, analyzing their every move, their cars, their vacation homes, their wives. Their wives were always assets, beautiful, well-connected, a reflection of their husband's success. I should have seen it then. I was an asset, and my value was tied to my job title. The Bennett Tower was his obsession. That building, Rory, he'd sigh, staring up at it as we walked down the street. It's not just a building, it's a statement. The management is brilliant. They command the highest per square foot rate in the city, and their tenant list is a who's who of corporate power. To have Sterling's name in that directory, that's legacy. He was talking about my father's legacy. He was praising my family's business acumen without a clue. The irony was a constant, private joke that I thought was charming. I'd smile to myself, imagining the day I would finally tell him. That brilliant management, that's me. That's my family. I'd pictured his shock, his awe, the way it would bring us closer. I'd believed, foolishly, that he would love me more for it. Now I see he would have just loved the asset more. The lie began to feel heavy a year into our relationship. There were close calls. We once attended a charity gala where I had to actively dodge members of my own company's board. I'd claimed a sudden bout of food poisoning and spent 30 minutes hiding in a bathroom, texting my apologies to our CEO, a man who had known me since I was in pigtails. Nathan had been annoyed. "You're missing major networking opportunities. Rory, the CEO of Sterling is here. This is a bad look." His concern wasn't for my health. It was for the missed connection. That should have been the final red flag. But I was in love. Or at least, I had convinced myself I was. I loved the routine, the companionship, the feeling of building a life with someone. I'd excused his relentless ambition as drive, his obsession with status as a desire for security. I'd projected my own values of loyalty and partnership onto a man who was incapable of possessing them. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a prop. When my father's health took a turn 6 months ago, I knew my time as Aurora Clark was running out. I started spending more time at the Bennett Group offices, learning the intricate details of the operation I was set to inherit. That's when I decided to get laid off. It was the cleanest way to transition. A plausible story that would allow me to shed my old identity and step into my new role without raising too many questions. The plan was perfect in its simplicity. I'd take a month off to decompress, and then I'd tell Nathan everything. I'd invite him into my world, the real one. But he never gave me the chance. The moment my asset value dropped to 0 in his eyes, he cashed out. A security guard, a burly man named George who had worked for my father for 30 years, passed the coffee shop window and gave me a subtle, questioning nod. He knew me as Ms. Bennett, the owner. He'd seen me with Nathan dozens of times, likely assuming Nathan knew who he was dating. The thought sent a fresh wave of humiliation through me. The whole building staff probably knew. They had watched me play house with a man who was now parading his ignorance for all to see. Enough. I stood up, my spine straight, the cold resolve from before solidifying into a plan. The pain in my chest was still there, but it was no longer a debilitating ache. It was fuel. Nathan thought he was on the cusp of a huge deal that would secure his partnership. He was about to negotiate the Sterling Properties lease renewal, a lease with Bennett Group, a lease with me. He wanted to be a power player in my building fine. Let the games begin. He was about to learn that the woman he'd just discarded wasn't just a player. She owned the entire board. The first week of my new, secret life was a blur of spreadsheets, legal documents, and strategic meetings. As Aurora Bennett, I stepped into the role my father had groomed me for, taking my seat at the head of the long, polished mahogany table in the 50th floor boardroom. The view of the Chicago skyline was commanding, a panorama of power that now answered to me, my team, a group of loyal executives who had known my plan all along, treated my transition with seamless professionalism. The primary item on our agenda, the Sterling Properties lease renewal. Seeing Nathan's name on the internal brief as Sterling's lead negotiator sent a jolt of ice through my veins. It was one thing to know it was coming. It was another to see it in crisp black ink under the heading Key Counterparty Personnel. My head of leasing, a sharp, discerning man named Marcus Vance, reported on his initial meeting with Nathan. "He's confident," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. "A little too confident, maybe. Comes across as the kind of guy who thinks charm is a substitute for a good offer." Marcus paused, a thoughtful frown on his face. "He also did something odd. He tried to build a personal rapport by sharing a story about his recent breakup." I held my breath, my knuckles white where I gripped my pen. "Oh?" I asked, my voice dangerously neutral. Marcus nodded, oblivious to the storm gathering inside me. "Yeah, said his ex just got laid off, lost all her drive." He spun this whole narrative about how, as an ambitious man, he had to make the hard choice to surround himself with winners, used it as a segue to talk about why Sterling Properties is a winning tenant for a winning building like ours. It was a bit tacky, to be honest. A little desperate. Tacky? Desperate? The words barely scratched the surface of the violation I felt. He was using me. He had taken our story, twisted it into a pathetic, self-serving anecdote, and was peddling it as a business tactic. He was trying to curry favor with my employee by painting me as a cautionary tale. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I had to physically restrain myself from telling Marcus the truth right then and there. Instead, I just nodded slowly. Keep that in mind during the negotiations. Marcus, it tells us what kind of man we're dealing with. Don't let his charm get in the way of our bottom line. The real escalation, however, didn't happen in the boardroom. It happened in the lobby. A few days later, I was heading out for the evening, my mind still churning over lease clauses and Nathan's sheer nerve. As I walked through the grand marble expanse, I saw him. He was standing by the revolving doors, laughing, his posture radiating a smug self-satisfaction. And he was not alone. Her name, as I would soon learn, was Cassandra Thorne. She was everything I wasn't trying to be. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, impossibly chic chignon. Her suit was a razor-sharp designer creation, and she held herself with the kind of aggressive poise that screamed, "investment banker." She was beautiful, yes, but more than that, she was a symbol. She was the living embodiment of the asset Nathan believed he deserved. He saw me. His eyes met mine across the lobby. There was no flicker of shame, no hint of regret. Instead, a triumphant smirk played on his lips. He tightened his arm around Cassandra's waist, pulling her closer in a possessive, performative gesture. Then he gave me a short, dismissive nod. It was a nod of pity, of condescension. It said, "This is what I have now. Look at what you've lost. Look at what you'll never be." I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a public branding, a deliberate humiliation. He wasn't just moving on. He was rubbing my nose in my perceived failure. He was using Cassandra to validate his decision to discard me. I stood frozen for a moment. The ambient noise of the lobby, the hushed conversations, the distant ring of a phone, the soft echo of footsteps on marble, fading to nothing. The world narrowed to the three of us in that tableau of betrayal, as if to twist the knife further. Cassandra turned and smiled at one of my security guards, George. "Have a good night, George," she said, her voice crisp and familiar. George, ever the professional, just nodded. "You too, Ms. Thorne, Ms. Thorne." I recognized the name instantly from our tenant directory. Cassandra Thorne was a vice president at Goldman Sachs. Their offices were on the 48th floor, a prestige tenant, a valuable tenant, and it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. Nathan wasn't just dating an upgrade, he was dating a strategic connection. He was leveraging his new relationship to embed himself deeper into the world he so desperately wanted to conquer my world. He was dating my tenant, The cold, professional anger I had felt in the boardroom curdled into something far more volatile. This was no longer just about a bad breakup and a soured business deal. This was a multifaceted assault on my identity, my history, and my professional world. He had turned my personal life into a cheap sales pitch and my professional space into a stage for his romantic conquests. He thought he was climbing the ladder, but he was just dancing on a trap door, and my hand was on the lever. The simple, clean act of denying his lease felt insufficient now. It was too quiet, too private. He had made this a public spectacle. He deserved a public response. The sight of Nathan with Cassandra Thorne in my lobby haunted me. It wasn't the simple jealousy of seeing an ex with someone new. It was the chilling realization that my personal space, my professional sanctuary, had been co-opted as a theater for his social climbing. I spent the next 2 days buried in my work, the cold anger a constant thrum beneath the surface. I sat in my father's chair, in his office that spanned half the 50th floor, the city of Chicago spread out before me like a map of my own kingdom. The power was tangible, a physical weight in the air. Yet, down in the lobby, I had felt powerless, exposed. The disconnect was jarring. I was reviewing the third quarter revenue projections when the email arrived. The subject line alone was an act of supreme arrogance. Celebrating the future, a toast to the Sterling and Bennett partnership. My blood ran cold. It was from Nathan. I clicked it open, my hand trembling slightly. It was a sleek, professionally designed Evite to a cocktail party at the Apex, a rooftop bar known for its stunning views and exorbitant prices. The event was scheduled for Friday night. He was celebrating the lease renewal deal, a deal that was not only unsigned, but one where my team, under my direct orders, had just submitted a counteroffer with a 20% rent increase and significantly stricter terms. According to Marcus, Nathan's team had received it that morning and had been blindsided. And yet, here he was, inviting his entire professional circle to a victory party. The sheer, unadulterated hubris was almost impressive. He was betting everything on his ability to charm and bully his way through the negotiation. He was creating public momentum, trying to make it professionally awkward for the Bennett Group management to refuse the deal after he'd already popped the champagne. But that wasn't the worst part. At the bottom of the generic invitation, there was a personal note, typed out as if an afterthought, Rory. I know this is probably the last thing you want to see right now, and I'm sure things are still tough, but I wanted to extend an olive branch. Come have a drink on me. See what I'm building. It might give you some inspiration for your next move. No hard feelings. Nate. I read it once, then twice. The condescension was so thick it felt like a physical slap. I'm sure things are still tough. Inspiration for your next move. He was offering me charity, a front-row seat to his triumph, bought and paid for with the money he earned by working in my building. He saw me as a pathetic, jobless creature to be pitied, and this invitation was his magnanimous gesture of pity. My entire body went rigid. The carefully constructed dam of my composure, the professional poise I had worked so hard to maintain, finally broke. A wave of raw, volcanic fury washed over me, so intense it made me dizzy. My first instinct was primal. I wanted to destroy him. I grabbed my phone, my thumb hovering over Marcus's contact number. I could end it all in 10 seconds. Marcus, kill the deal. Terminate all negotiations with Sterling Properties. Effective immediately. Find a reason. Any reason. I could evict his company. I could call the CEO of Sterling, a man who played golf with my father, and tell him exactly what kind of employee he had in Nathan Scott. I could ruin him quietly, efficiently, from the sterile anonymity of my 50th floor fortress. But as I stared at the phone, my own reflection a ghostly image on the dark screen, I hesitated. What would that accomplish? He would be fired. Yes, he would be humiliated within his firm, but he would never truly understand why. He would spin another story, cast himself as the victim of a ruthless, faceless corporation, the narrative would still, in some way, be his. My role would be invisible. My truth, unheard. He had humiliated me publicly, using my name, my story, my building as his props. A silent, corporate execution felt like letting him off easy. It felt like hiding. My father's voice echoed in my mind. Earn your own respect. Respect wasn't just about making money or holding a title. It was about facing down those who wronged you. It was about controlling the narrative, not just the outcome. I put the phone down. My breathing was ragged, my heart pounding, but the chaotic rage began to cool, crystallizing into something sharp and brilliant, like a diamond forming under pressure, a plan, a terrifying, beautiful, and absolutely necessary plan. Nathan wanted a spectacle. He wanted an audience to witness his ascent. I would give him one. I would walk into his party, into the trap he thought he was setting for me. I would let him bask in his fraudulent glory. I would let him stand in the center of the room, surrounded by his colleagues, his new girlfriend, and the bosses he was so desperate to impress. I would let him reach the very peak of his arrogance. And then I would introduce myself, not as Rory Clark, his pathetic, unemployed ex-girlfriend, but as Aurora Bennett, his landlord, the woman who held his entire future in the palm of her hand, the woman whose name was on the building he was so proud to work in, and on the lease he was so desperate to sign. I turned back to my computer. The rage was gone, replaced by an unnerving, icy calm. I moved my cursor to the bottom of the invitation, to the little box that said RSVP. A slow smile spread across my face. It was the first genuine smile I'd had in a week. I clicked attending. He wanted me to see what he was building. He had no idea I was the one who could sign the demolition permit. The Apex rooftop bar was exactly as I'd expected, a sea of sharp suits and expensive dresses, all set against the glittering backdrop of the Chicago skyline at night. The air buzzed with self-important chatter and the clinking of glasses. From my vantage point near the entrance, I could see Nathan holding court in the center of the main patio. He was a master of ceremonies in his element, a triumphant smile plastered on his face, one arm draped casually around Cassandra's waist. He was glowing, soaking in the admiration of his colleagues from Sterling Properties. I even spotted the firm's two senior partners, Mr. Hayes and Mr. Peterson, listening to him with amused expressions. I took a deep breath. The cool night air steadying my nerves, I had chosen my outfit with surgical precision, a tailored, blood-red dress that was both elegant and unapologetic. My long, dark hair was sleek and straight, and my heels clicked with quiet authority on the stone floor. This wasn't the Rory he knew, the woman in comfortable sweaters and practical shoes. This was Aurora Bennett. I let him enjoy his moment for a full 15 minutes, sipping a glass of ice water as I watched the performance. He was retelling the story Marcus had warned me about, the hard choice to leave his unambitious girlfriend. I could hear snippets of it on the wind. You just have to surround yourself with people who elevate you, he was saying, gesturing vaguely with his champagne flute. It's about a winning mindset. That's how we secured the Bennett Tower deal. We showed them we were winners. Mr. Hayes, a portly man with a booming laugh, clapped him on the shoulder. Well, you certainly delivered, Scott. We were worried when we saw their counteroffer. That 20% hike was a killer. Glad you could work your magic and smooth things over. Nathan's smile tightened just a fraction. A lie. He hadn't smoothed anything over. He was gambling that public perception would force my hand. He let out a confident laugh. It's all about relationships, Mr. Hayes, knowing the right people, understanding what they want. That was my cue. I began to walk toward them. I didn't rush. I moved with a deliberate, unhurried grace that turned heads as I passed. The sea of people seemed to part for me instinctively. The first person to notice my approach was Cassandra. Her smile faltered, replaced by a confused, vaguely hostile expression. Nathan followed her gaze, and his face went through a rapid series of emotions first: shock that I had actually shown up, then a flash of annoyance, and finally, the return of his smug, pitying smirk. "Rory," he said, his voice loud enough for the group to hear. "I'm so glad you could make it. Everyone," he announced, turning to his bosses. "This is Aurora Clark, the friend I was telling you about. She's exploring her options right now." The condescension in his tone was a naked, public insult. He was framing me as a charity case. Mr. Hayes and Mr. Peterson gave me polite, dismissive smiles, the kind you give the waitress or the coat check girl. I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes fixed on Nathan. "It's Bennett, actually," I said, my voice cutting through the ambient noise like glass. "Aurora Bennett." Nathan's smirk wavered. "What? My name," I clarified, stopping directly in front of him. I was close enough now to see the tiny bead of sweat on his temple. "It's not Clark. That's my mother's name. My name is Aurora Bennett." A confused silence fell over the group. Mr. Hayes and Mr. Peterson exchanged a look. "Bennett, Mr." Hayes repeated, his brow furrowed. "Like the Bennett Tower." I gave him a warm, professional smile. "The very same. It's a pleasure to formally meet you, Mr. Hayes, Mr. Peterson. I'm the new majority owner and acting CEO of the Bennett Group." Asha. The impact of my words was instantaneous and devastating. Cassandra's hand, which had been resting on Nathan's arm, dropped to her side as if she'd been burned. Mr. Peterson's jaw literally slackened. Mr. Hayes's face turned a shade of purple that clashed violently with his tie, but their reactions were nothing compared to Nathan's. All the color drained from his face, leaving his handsome features looking like a wax sculpture. The charming smile, the confident posture, the cold ambition in his eyes, it all dissolved at once, replaced by a raw, gaping horror. He looked at me, then at the building that loomed behind us. My building, and the pieces clicked together in his mind with the force of a car crash. You're, he stammered, unable to form a complete sentence. "Your landlord." I finished for him, my voice still calm, but with an edge of steel. "And the person who signed off on that 20% rent increase you received this morning, the one you haven't, by the way." Smoothed over. I turned my gaze to his bosses. "I must say, Mr. Hayes, I'm surprised to be at a party celebrating a deal that is not only unsigned, but is contingent on Sterling Properties accepting our new, non-negotiable terms. My head of leasing, Marcus Vance, was under the impression your team found them. A killer." I used their own words, a verbal stiletto. "Mr. Hayes looked at Nathan, his eyes blazing with fury. "Scott, what the hell is this?" Nathan was speechless. He just stood there, swaying slightly, his world collapsing around him in front of the very people he had tried so desperately to impress. "He told me," I continued, my voice measured and clear, for all to hear, "that he needed a partner who was a winner. He believed my value was tied to my job title. A title I only held to prove to myself that I could succeed without my family's name. A name he was so desperate to be associated with." I gave Nathan a look that was devoid of all pity. "It seems you have a problem with assessing value. Nathan, you should be careful with that. In your line of work, it can be a fatal flaw." With that, I turned to Mr. Hayes. "My office will be in touch with yours on Monday to see if you wish to proceed with the lease under our proposed terms. If not, we have a waiting list of other winning tenants. Enjoy your party." I didn't look back as I walked away. I didn't need to. I could feel the scorched earth I had left behind me. I could hear the panicked, furious whispers erupting in my wake. The power he had craved, the status he had killed our relationship for, had been a mirage. The real power had been standing in front of him all along, and he had been too blind to see it. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I had my driver take me to the shore of Lake Michigan. I stepped out of the car and walked to the water's edge, the wind whipping my hair around my face. The city skyline twinkled in the distance, a crown of electric jewels, with the Bennett Tower standing tallest and proudest among them. For the first time, I didn't see it as my father's legacy or a symbol of my family's wealth. I saw it as my own. I had defended it. I had defended myself. The furious energy of the confrontation had faded, leaving behind a profound, quiet calm. There was no elation, no triumphant glee, just a sense of rightness, of a balance restored. I hadn't destroyed Nathan for revenge. I had done it for clarity. His world was built on a foundation of perception and status. I hadn't destroyed the man, but I had demolished the false reality he inhabited. The fallout, I knew, would be swift and brutal. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Mr. Hayes from Sterling called me at 6 a.m. They're accepting all terms of the new lease. He personally apologized for his junior negotiator's unprofessional behavior. Said the man is no longer with their firm. So, he was fired. It was an inevitable consequence. I felt a brief, hollow pang, not of pity, but of the finality of it all. The chapter was well and truly closed. 2 days later, a long, rambling email from Nathan appeared in my inbox. The subject line was simply, "My name, Aurora." It was a pathetic cocktail of apologies, excuses, and desperate pleas. He was sorry. He wrote, he had been a fool, blinded by ambition. He hadn't known. If he had known who I was, he would have treated me like a queen. He loved me. He insisted. Not my name or my money. He begged for a second chance, for a single conversation to explain. If he had known who I was, he would have treated me differently. That was the core of it, the confession buried beneath layers of self-pity. His apology wasn't for his character. It was for his miscalculation. He wasn't sorry for devaluing me. He was sorry for devaluing a powerful asset. I read the email once, my face impassive. Then, without a reply, I moved it to the trash folder and deleted it permanently. He still didn't get it. He never would. The final loose end was Cassandra Thorne. A week after the party, my assistant informed me that Ms. Thorne had requested a brief, private meeting. I was intrigued, so I agreed. She walked into my office, her usual aggressive poise replaced by a quiet, almost somber demeanor. "Ms. Bennett," she began, not sitting until I gestured for her to do so. "I'm not here to apologize on Nathan's behalf. He's not my concern. I'm here to apologize for my own part." I raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. "Your part, I knew what he was doing," she said, her gaze direct and unflinching. "I knew he was using our association to bolster his position. I saw how he spoke about you, and I didn't challenge it. It was professionally advantageous for me to be seen with the man who was supposedly locking down the Sterling lease. I was opportunistic, and I was complicit in his narrative about you." She took a deep breath. "When I realized who you were, I was horrified, not because of the power you hold, but because I, another woman in this business, allowed myself to be a prop in demeaning someone else. It was poor judgment. And for that, I am truly sorry." I studied her for a long moment. It was a raw, honest admission. She wasn't making excuses. She was taking ownership in her. I saw a flicker of the same hard-won pragmatism that I was just beginning to embrace. She was ambitious. Yes, but she wasn't morally bankrupt like Nathan. She understood that respect was a currency more valuable than a good connection. "Thank you, Ms. Thorne," I said, and I meant it. "I appreciate your candor. I've terminated my personal relationship with him, for what it's worth," she added, standing up. "My judgment in men is clearly in need of a serious review." A small, wry smile touched her lips. "But my judgment in real estate is sound. You run a tight ship, Ms. Bennett. Congratulations on officially taking the helm." She left, and for the second time in as many weeks, I felt a sense of clean, quiet resolution. The world wasn't as simple as heroes and villains. It was filled with people like Cassandra, making calculated choices, and sometimes making the wrong ones. And it was filled with people like me, who were finally learning that true power wasn't about hiding who you are, but about embracing it, defending it, and defining it on your own terms. I looked out my window at the city below. The pain of Nathan's betrayal had become a scar, no longer a fresh wound, but a reminder of a lesson learned. He hadn't dumped me for losing my job. He had dumped me for a version of myself that was never real. In doing so, he gave me the greatest gift I could have asked for. He forced me to stop being Aurora Clark, the project manager, and to finally become Aurora Bennett, the woman who owned the building. And from up here, on the 50th floor, the view was spectacular.